Question 22 from the SAT number 17. This is the April 2019 QAS test. And the question says, the main purpose of the passage is to. So this is the big picture question that sort of opens up the series of questions here. And what we're going to do to solve this question is a couple of things. So one, what I typically recommend is to go back to the introduction to the passage. And within the introduction, we should get a decent sense of what the passage is about. We can also look at this first little subtitle here, which gives the actual title of the passage. And both of those places typically will tell us about the main purpose of the passage. There's also a good deal of reliance on memory that I think will help you to solve these pretty quickly. So if you saw the passage outline video that I did, that'll give you a better sense of what the passage is about. Or if you read it on your own, you can kind of use your own understanding. I think you need a blend of the two to solve these questions effectively. So the passage itself is titled Rare Woodland Plant Uses Cryptic Coloration to Hide from Its Predators. I think without really understanding the passage, it's hard to make sense of what's important about this, although almost everything that we need is captured in this title. So we're talking about a specific rare woodland plant, so we're talking about one specific plant, and we're talking about how it uses cryptic coloration, which is another way to say camouflage, to hide from its predators. If we look at the introduction too, we notice that the first introduction here is just talking about camouflage in general, that many animals use it. It seems like a good strategy. It helps them to survive longer, reproduce, etc. Then it says this is very common in the animal kingdom, but whoever heard of a plant doing the same thing? So it introduces the idea of plant camouflage. Then it explains how we basically know that plants use coloration and pigmentation to attract pollinators, but what about to basically avoid predators? And then we're introduced to Matthew Klooster, who wants to investigate this. And he says that he wants to investigate specifically one rare woodland plant, Monotropsis odorata, and see if it might serve a similar purpose as the stripes on a tiger. And as we continue to read, we know that ultimately we find out that this plant indeed does use camouflage. There's some different paradoxes they discuss about it. But overall, it basically seems to be looking at how this plant in particular uses camouflage. So let's see if we have an answer choice that will match that for our question. So A says the main purpose of the passage is to contrast the activities of plant species that rely on photosynthesis with the activities of those that do not. So this would make more sense if the structure of the passage was to say, here's X, Y, Z plant species, they use photosynthesis, and they also do these things. They have this metabolic process or whatever. And then there's plants A, B, C that basically they don't have photosynthesis, and then we're contrasting the two. Really nothing about there. So they don't really talk about how Monotropsis odorata is special because it uses photosynthesis or doesn't use photosynthesis. It doesn't use photosynthesis, but it talks about that but doesn't highlight it. It doesn't really compare it directly in the most of the passage to other species. So for this reason, I don't think this is a great answer choice. We should get rid of A. Then we have B, which says the main purpose of the passage is to explore the attempts of scientists, to understand the means by which plants attract pollinators. So I think this is wrong for a number of reasons. One is we're really only talking about one scientist, and we don't want to be petty, but that's basically how this SAT works. They're talking about scientists, but the passage is talking about one scientist. And what the scientist in the passage is talking about or researching is basically camouflage in plants, not how plants attract pollinators, right? We remember the passage sort of takes that as a given. It already says that we know that this is true. We're more interested in looking at the camouflage, so we get rid of B. C says that the purpose of the passage is to describe an illuminating defensive strategy of a particular species of a plant. And I think that this is a great answer choice. Defensive strategy would just basically be using camouflage, and we're talking about one particular species of a plant, Monotropsis odorata. So this is pretty good. I say we keep it. D says that the purpose of the passage is to explain the results of experiments comparing the function of color in plants and animals. So this is B. We have multiple experiments, and what we're doing is we're comparing how plants use color versus how animals use color. And even though both plants and animals are mentioned in their use of color, we're not really looking at an experiment that is comparing the two. The only experiment is hardly even an experiment. It's really just a study that they're doing, an observational study. And they're looking at one specific plant, right? The Monotropsis odorata. And they're not really comparing plants and animals here. So D is wrong. And then we can choose answer choice C as our correct answer for question number 22.